Hello, Taylor Ellwood here, and welcome to the latest Magical Experiments podcast. Sheena, welcome. Here you are with me.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it is. So, today we're going to talk about the tools that build the magician.
And I get to interview you, which is super exciting. But first, I want to say a big welcome to everyone who is joining us.
Yes, definitely. For people who are joining us live, if you have questions throughout, let us know. We'll be happy to answer them. We're definitely going to be exploring in general the topic of magical tools. And yes, you're going to interview me because I've developed a number of magical tools over the years. So let's get started.
Excellent. Well, what is a magical tool? Starting with a really easy one.
What is a magical tool? Well, this right here, this body is a magical tool. Like seriously, a person's body is one of the most potent magical tools that they have access to. And I think a lot of times people get caught up in externalizing the tools, like, oh, it's this staff, it's this knife, it's this chalice, it's all these other things. And yes, those things are important. But really, at the end of the day, your body is one of the most potent magical tools that you have because there's so many different things that you can do with your body, and your body is attuned to the magical work that you're doing. So it's going to sense the things that need to be sensed, and it's going to bring that to your attention and awareness. So that's my first answer. But also at the same time, and you'll see me reaching over for different things. This is a magical tool, right? This is a magical tool. This is actually a piece of wood, driftwood, that was gnawed by a beaver. I found it on the Columbia, at the very mouth, right by the Pacific in the Columbia. And this is a rod that I have used for magical workings. It's a really potent tool that I've worked with. I've worked with it a lot in the last few years. And so this is another example of a magical tool. And it's a tool that I took off the beach. I found it. I worked on sanding it a little bit. I put some oil on it to preserve the wood. And what makes it a tool is the purpose that I put it toward. It could just be a stick. And some people would say, well, that's just a stick. But a magical tool is more than that. A magical tool is defined and inspired by your imagination and your creativity. It's your ability to take something, regardless of what that thing is, and find multiple purposes for it that reach outside the mundane and into the spiritual and magical.
And I love this, and I haven't actually seen your magical stick, and I didn't know about it, but it's absolutely perfect because I have taught lessons on, how to create magical tools and magical wands. And I always go that, it's fundamentally any tool is an extension of your body, your field, your magic that's going out into the world. And when I was teaching how to make magic wands, I couldn't have an example ready because I hadn't made mine yet. And it was because I was waiting. I knew it had to come from the Columbia, and I was just waiting for it to be delivered. I'm on the other end of the Columbia River. So I actually found my stick actually when you were visiting last, and it too had been gnawed by a beaver. And you didn't even tell me about your stick. So I love it. This is great.
Well, these are the things that we discover about each other, right? Kind of like the question of the day. We discover new things about each other as time goes on. Now, I see more people joining us. So for people joining us, we are talking about magical tools. And if you have questions along the way, please feel free to drop those questions in the comments so that we can share them. Yeah, I've actually had this magical rod for a long time now, and it has been one of my favorite tools to use. I think it's funny because we live. Well, I don't even live by the Columbia. I live 2 hours south, but we essentially live on opposite ends of the Columbia, and that's one of the magical synchronicities and coincidences that have connected us. And that in and of itself is a very powerful thing. So, in one sense, too, Yeah, here's also my definition of a magical tool. A magical tool is something that helps you do something that would be harder to do without it. Basically, it helps you to conceptualize and navigate reality. I think a lot of times, when people think of magical tools, they might think, well, like, like an athame or like a cup, but it's like, well, what does that really represent? There's an archetypical, aspect to it. Like, it represents certain things. There's correspondences. So I might associate a cup with, for example, with the element of water. A lot of times that's what people will do. But I think it's more than just that. It's, what does the tool help me actually do that I would not necessarily be able to do as easily or at all without
Mm-hmm.
that tool? And that's one of the ways that I really approach magical work in general when I'm looking at creating a tool or working with a tool. Is I have this really neat idea, this concept. How do I figure out a way to actually make that into a reality? And sometimes one of the steps is to create a magical tool.
Yep. And there's natural tools as well. Like, as an example, the Columbia River, it is a spirit that we work with. Um, but for me, it is a tool. I happen to have a lot of clients and friends who live somewhere along the Columbia. So when I'm doing magic for them, I will go down to the river. I will use the river and the flow of the river itself as a magical tool to deliver energy and magic and things like that. So we do have a question. Can magical tools be astral?
Oh yeah, great question. Yeah, a magical tool you can have an astral equivalent of a magical tool. In fact, one example of that would be a memory mansion, which is going to be, kind of like a specific, like a memory theater, where you're creating a theater in the astral realm that represents specific ideas and concepts that then you can draw upon and draw those out using that theater as a field and presentation. And there's other aspects to it. I've done a lot of interesting work with magical theaters over the years, and it's not something that's entirely novel. Like, it's not like something I came up with. I mean, it's been around for, literally thousands of years. Like, the ancient Greek and Roman rhetoricians had essentially memory theaters that they used when they were delivering speeches. So you can definitely have that. I mean, the concept of an astral temple in general is a great example of that. And you and I actually have a dedicated dream temple in space that we work in every night when we're connecting with each other. And that's one of the, and that's essentially a tool of connection for us. It has helped us connect very deeply and magically and potently, in terms of the magic that we work.
And within that, we also build our own magical tools within the dream space as well. So, like, we have different healing altars, community altars, different things like that. Our library is pretty awesome. So, I would love for everyone who is joining us, what are some of your magical tools? We would love to hear from you. And in the meantime, Taylor, what was your first magical tool? And what did you learn from the process? Like, why did you even think to create one?
The first magical tool. The first one I created, because I mean, I bought tools, right, from like the local cult shop. Like, I bought a couple of things, and don't get me wrong, you can buy a tool and you still have to make it your own. But the first tool that I had, if we're going to talk about that, is this staff right here. I've had this staff since I was 18 years old. I'm now 48, so to give you guys a concept, that's 30 years. And I've had this staff. I found this staff in the woods in Pennsylvania, and it was really kind of a fascinating case where I was over at a friend's place. I found it, and what we did is it was barked, so I had to debark it first of all, strip the bark off, sand it down. I thought about carving symbols into it, and ultimately ended up carving a stylized my stylized T sigil. I had my T sigil even back then, so it's like right here. You can't see it, but it's right there. And this tool was designed to help me with channeling the energies of nature and the elemental spirits. I don't really. I still use it as a walking staff. I don't really use it anymore for the original purpose because I've done so much work with elemental spirits and nature spirits at this point that I can kind of innately do that. But at the time when I was 18, I didn't know how to do that work without a tool. I needed a tool to help me conceptualize that. And it's still quite potent. I mean, I can still feel the energy in it even right now. But it's not. I don't use it for that purpose anymore. I still occasionally use it in ritual. Oh, there we go. But it's something which is continually, it's something that I hold near and dear to my heart. I've had it for a long, long time, and I don't think I'll ever get rid of it for the rest of my life. And I mean, I've had other tools along those lines. Sometimes I've gifted some of those tools. Like I have a student of mine who I gave her one of my original magical staves. It was a stave that I picked up actually from a workplace. It had been a broom or something like that. The end of it broke off, but I kept the wooden part and I turned it into a stave that I used for many years. And then I gave it to a friend of mine because I felt like she needed it more than I did.
Okay, so as a responsible magician who is aware of how things, especially magical tools, implements, things like that, can hold energy, do you have a clearing process or a letting go process? Or if you're giving a magical tool as a gift, for example, how do you do it in a way that's clean?
So one of the things that I do is, first of all, I have my tools locked or set up and locked down so that they only work for me, unless I give permission to somebody else. So that's one thing. So what I would do is first disable that particular lock. And then what I do is I usually do like a little ceremony with the person where I'm essentially passing over the energetic signature of the tool to that person and allowing them to claim it. I'm clearing out my particular hold on that tool and letting it go. I am allowing the qualities of the tool to stay there because I don't want to take that away. In fact, I actually do create magical tools for some of my clients. And so, when I'm creating those magical tools, I don't want to just, obviously they need to have a certain level of functionality and be able to do certain things. If I just took that away, that would not really, it wouldn't be a magical tool any longer. But it's passing it on to that person and making sure that they understand like how to access it and work with it. It's a very simple process, but it's very integral to the way that I approach tools. And what I would really recommend for anyone is if you decide to pass on a magical tool to someone, do it with love and reverence, even if it's for a client. Like if I have somebody that I'm working with and they've paid me to develop a tool, I still do it with love and reverence because it's really important to honor and acknowledge what that tool is for. That tool has kind of taken on a life of its own. It's serving a very distinct and important purpose in order to help that person do something. I see we had a question from another person, or no, maybe it was an observation. Nima said, one of my current favorite magic tools is a doll that I made. Gotta also have my grimoire. I think of it as a potent and important magic tool of mine. Yeah, that, for sure. I mean, and here's the beautiful thing with people, like what I found with magicians the world over is that we all have our own unique tools and things along those lines. I'm curious, what was your first magical tool, Sheena?
Oh, I don't know that I know. I was kind of one of those like kids who was making up tools and things even before I knew what it was, before I really fully knew what magic was. That's a long way in the past memory vault. I can share one of my favorites though.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite tools that I have made. And this is an orgone pyramid that's done in resin. And I very specifically created it for when I was doing ceremony to amplify and filter divine masculine and feminine energy. And that corresponds to a lot of the stones that I have in here, the copper. Um, its purpose is really to provide a focal point so that I don't have to be clearing that energy on top of everything else that I'm doing. It sometimes in group work where there is safety, everything comes up to the surface. And a lot of that is relationship, and a lot of that is dealing with, masculine and feminine, whether that's trauma experiences, just stuck energy. So I designed this, and it took about 4 weeks to make. Every layer has to be done and cured, and there has to be so much thought put into how it's created. So I was weaving it in with intention and energy the entire time that I was doing it. And I travel with this, I take it to ceremonies, and it really just serves as that focal point. So I don't have to be actively doing that work. Of course, I'm always, monitoring everything that's happening, but it's just amazing at transmuting that energy and like really anchoring in the type of masculine and feminine energy that I want to be bringing into my circles.
That's a great example of a magical tool. And again, I mean, look at the purpose of it. It's serving a very specific role so that you don't have to do everything. I mean, I think that's another important aspect of magical tools. Like, it's not always having to do everything yourself, even if you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the reason I work with a magical tool is that, yes, I could do that thing on my own at this point. Like, the tool served a purpose. It helped me get to a certain place, but I've been able to kind of conceptualize or work through what it was doing, and I can do that on my own without it. And yet, sometimes it can be really useful to just have that tool there to handle it so that I don't have to do everything. Because otherwise, it becomes just that much more work, especially when really what I need to be doing is serving my community.
Absolutely.
Now, can I
So,
share with you one of my
yeah,
most potent tools?
yes.
One of my most potent tools is my paintbrush. My artistic approach to things. So, and I'll share a couple of examples here. I've created a lot of art over the years. These are elemental mini portals that I've developed. Here's one right here, and it's the spiritual quintessence, and then this is the elemental quintessence. So they're actually matched together. There we go. And it's a great example of, like, in this case, a tool that represents a very specific essence. So I do a lot of magical paintings. I create entities that way. I do a lot of magical spell work that way. Um, Art is one of my favorite ways of expressing things. Here's another one that I have. This is like this is for the element of stillness and spiritual stillness. So this is spiritual stillness, and this is elemental stillness. And so these serve as portals. The idea being that one is in the background and the other's in the foreground, creating a very specific portal toward that energy and drawing that in into the space if that's what I want to work with.
Beautiful. So we just want to encourage everyone who is joining us, if you have any questions about tools, creating them, using them, or you have anything that you'd like to share with the community, please do. We love to hear from you. Do you have any tools that just failed spectacularly?
Yeah, I actually really don't.
Oh, okay. Well, why then? Why do your tools work?
Well, a large reason why my tools work is actually kind of the way that I approach magic in general. So if something doesn't work, I like to do a process of troubleshooting, and I figure out like what isn't working and why, and then I go back in and make the corrections to it and fix it. A lot of times it's really the way that I approach magic in general is that it's important to really adapt a feeling of curiosity. How can I tinker with something and improve on it and connect with it and work with it? So when I create tools, I usually have a very specific outcome in mind. The tool is going to do something. I'll use a good example here. I'll show another tool. This would be a great way. So one of my tools, this is something I've had for a long time. This is a wooden box I've had since I was a child, a young kid. It is my memory box, and I use it for space-time magic work. And what I did is I used to hold a lot of different memories, but what I did is on the inside I painted like a silver web, and it's used to help me connect with the silver web of space and time. And what I'll do is I'll put my hands on it like right here. I'll close my eyes and I just connect to that web of space and time and use it to connect to the possibilities. It serves as a portal of sorts. When I first developed this tool, I thought about the purpose of the box itself. The box represented memories. It represented things that had happened a long time ago. It was meant to represent, something of safety. It was a privacy box, that little padlock and everything else. What I wanted to be able to do was reach in and treat it as a memory tool. And so what I did is I kind of modeled it off of the Harry Potter pensieve, which is kind of like a well, of memory. They talk about it in the Harry Potter series. And, I was like, that sounded pretty cool. So I put together this box with that purpose in mind, being able to access my memories. But then I changed it because I realized I wanted to use it to surf not just the past, but be able to work with the future. So when I look at tools, I always think about it like if it's not working quite the way that I want, I start asking myself questions. What could I do to improve on this? What could I change? I never look at anything as a failure. I look at it as a learning opportunity. It might not work in the moment, but what I do is I adapt it and modify it in order to figure out what I can do to improve on it. And that's really a recommendation I would make in general around magic, not just magical tools, but just magical work in general. Get curious. If something isn't working the way that you think it ought to work, there's probably something to discover there. There's a question to ask. There's something to trace because the process, if it's not working, there's probably something in the process that's getting in the way. Could be internal, could be external, could be a variable that you didn't consider. Whatever it is, it's important to tap into that and be open and curious about it so you can discover what you can do with it.
So it seems like your tools really change over time, like as your practice evolves. And I'm just curious if you have any examples of, where something started and where it is today, something that you're actively using. I know you just gave us one, but I want another one.
You want another one?
I do.
Right. I'm going to share two examples, actually. One right now is a blindfold, and I've just started recently doing some experiments with blindfolds as a result of some trainings I did around shadow work facilitation and things like that. I kind of got curious as to how I could use that in general with spiritual work. So each day when I'm doing my daily sphere of artwork, I will wear a blindfold and I will use that while I'm chanting. There's like chants that I've memorized. I'll use that while I'm chanting and calling up the energies, calling in the archangels, all of that. And then what I end up doing is I will afterwards meditate with that blindfold on. And what's been fascinating for me with that has just been exploring how shutting down my eyes has opened the doors for expansion and potential. So something that started out initially as a tool for, as a way to kind of just like maybe get a sense as to what was going on with people and reading them better, by shutting down your eyes, because I've used this in facilitation work when I'm facilitating men. Turned into something else. It's turned into a tool for psychic expansion of the senses, like going into ESP. And I'm going to be writing more about this in an article coming up here. in next month or the month after. Just, we like to plan our content out. But another example of a tool that I have worked with is like scrying mirrors. One of the things that I do, I use a lot of scrying mirrors. And one of the things that I like to do is actually use scrying mirrors with other tools of scrying and create what I call dual scrying. Now, I've written about this in my book, Scrying the Divine, and shared some of the experiments that I did there. But essentially what ends up happening is you have like a scrying mirror in the background, and then you have a candle in front of it. And what you're doing is you're staring through the candle, scrying through the candle to the mirror, and ultimately using the candle as a way to create a deeper state of fascination with the mirror. And what I found is that I can set it up so that I can work with the optical illusion of the candle. And what I mean by that is I might have one candle, but if I set it up at just the right distance, I can actually use the natural blind spot to create an experience where it seems like there are two candles there instead of one. And this creates this corridor effect, which leads into a deeper state of fascination and exploration. And I've used this in order to do deep internal work, but also to connect with spirits more potently and powerfully. And what I'm doing at the same time is I'm using two scrying tools at the same time. Some people might be like, well, why I use two scrying tools at the same time? My answer to that is because I think that a lot of times it can be really fascinating to combine multiple tools to see what the effect is. I do this also with like tarot readings. So I do tarot readings where I actually use two decks at the same time. So instead of just using one, I use two. And what I found is that when I use two, the level of clarity and around the details and just kind of the overall reading becomes a lot more effective because I have those two different decks and I'm seeing how they intersect together to create a very comprehensive experience. Like, for example, I might draw for an oracle deck the ash card. And the ash card, is one thing. And then I might draw the tower card for a regular tarot deck. And what I have is essentially two tower cards right there. Well, what is that doing? It's indicating that there's definitely some tower energy to explore, but it has two different takes on the tower. And so that's an example of that.
Beautiful. So I think that another aspect of working with our tools, or when we're looking at designing new tools, is what knowledge and experience do we already have that we can externalize for new insights. So one example of this is I create a lot of charts when I'm dowsing. And it's just a much easier, just like any knowledge that's in my head, if I can get it out onto paper and I can use it as a dowsing tool. I do a lot of aromatherapy, perfumery, and herbalism. Fair warning, don't douse with these things if you don't have the knowledge to be able to look and make sure that you're dosing properly and things like that. But if you do have that knowledge, it can uncover layers that you wouldn't normally think of because you're sometimes in your own head about your knowledge. So I'll be working with a client and, I'm creating a blend for them and I go in and I check and it's like it might suggest an oil that I wouldn't normally put in it from a logical point of view, but it is something that would help them on an emotional level or a magical level, or there's another synergy that I might not have been considering. So it just makes it easier. Do you have any kind of tools where you're kind of transposing your knowledge into something that you can work with?
I'd say all my tools, really. I mean, like case in point, this is a recent mask that I created. And, for me, that mask was embodying, a specific experience, like what is facing outward, but also what is inward.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it represents very specific messages then that I can, kind of work with. And it gives me a way to externalize that. Or I have spirit portals. So Spirit portals are basically evocation portals. So this is like a goetic sigil for Folklore, which is goetic daemon. And I have I have some of these hanging up on walls, but this is a portable one that I've created. And so what it's doing is it lets me connect with that spirit without doing the whole convoluted evocation process that you see in a lot of grimoires. Because what I've done is I've created the painting, I've formed the connection, and that's representing that connection to the spirit, but it's also a physical embodiment of the spirit. Another example here would be this little spirit board that I have along with the pendulum, which I use for elemental work. Like if I want to dowse for specific types of elemental energies, I can do that. And this goes beyond the classic 5 elements of earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. Includes some other elements that I've worked with. My approach really to magical tools in general is that there's always this continual back and forth. Because the tool is alive. This is the thing that I think is really important to recognize. Your tool is alive. It's not just a tool. It is an embodiment of your magic, but it is also a connection with the spirits. It's a connection with the world around you. It's a way to relate to the world. There's one of my favorite games that I've played. It's a game called Death Stranding. And at the very beginning of the game, they have this quote about, that the first tools that people had were the stick and the rope. The rope was for connection and the stick was for keeping things away. And I thought that was really fascinating exploration, that idea, because there was purpose there. But then I also think, like, how do we bring it to life? So for me, when I work with a magical tool and I create one, I'm not just creating something that is static. It's evolving, it's changing, it's growing, and it's kind of similar to my approach to working with spirits. It's a collaborative relationship, and so it's going to grow and change, even as I grow and change. And I think this is a really important way to approach tools, that we're not treating them as objects to do something for us. Like right now, for example, we're both on our phones doing this interview. Our phone is serving as a tool to help us connect, but it's more than just that. It's allowing us to communicate with our community. Hello to all of you here. It's giving us a way to interact. And I thank the spirit of that phone. So I kind of take an animist approach to it, really, with my tools. Because to me, everything has a life force of its own. It may not be a life force in the conventional sense of the words, but that doesn't mean it's not alive. Even like the painting in the background of the elephant, and there's another painting of like elephant over there, has ritual significance to me. Everything I have in my house is something that is embodied and present and has a feeling of energy and connection to it. And I think that's a really important approach to take to tools. So one of the things I would invite to all of you is, like, look at your own tools and ask yourself, how is this another form of life? How is this a living being that I am connecting with that's helping me to reach out to the world around me and reach within me as well, to the hidden resources within that maybe I need help accessing? And how can I honor that tool and work with it and help it in the process of evolving and growing?
That's beautiful. And I think it's a good time to tell our community about the challenge and the invitation that we are laying down.
All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and share that then?
Oh, okay.
Or you expecting me to?
Oh, no, I can do it. I was going to give you an opening if you wanted, but I'm happy to do it. I'm so excited. This kind of all came in today as we were talking. What we're really wanting to do with Magical Experiments is have all of us experimenting and learning from each other. And I think there's no better way to do that than to look at all of our tools and to create some new ones. So what we're going to do is invite you to create your own tool. It could be a pendulum, a wand, a deck, a dice, a dream mask, a playlist. It could be anything that you want. But we want it to be something that that can be used as part of your magical practice in an ongoing way that you form a relationship with, instead of just like a one-off spell or a one-off ritual. You don't have to be super crafty, although many of our best tools are our artistic expressions. So we're going to invite you to create your own and to share it with us. And we're actually going to be doing a little bit of a contest. So we'll include all of this information in the show notes. But if you want to participate, we're going to invite you to choose your form. So what magical function do you want to support? It might be to focus more. It might be for joy or protection or clarity, or, something that is addressing a real need that you have in your life right now. And then leaning into what form wants to come through. And just being kind of open. You might have something immediately come to mind that you want to create, or you might just open yourself up to see kind of what wants to come through. And then infusing it with your intention. And you can charge it, journal with it, speak to it, name it, ask it what it needs, and then start using it. So integrating it into your practice and just allowing yourself to see what unfolds, and then share it with us. So we'll include an email that you can send it to us, and you might want to include a photo, a short description, a story, a poem, basically just kind of looking at what did you make, why, and what happened when you used it. So we're running a magical experiment to create a tool. And we're going to keep it open until the 1st of August. And so what we would like to do is everyone who participates will be featured in a community inspiration post that we're going to do up, so we can kind of all share and learn from each other and just experience the magic of each other. And we're going to do a draw for a private 2-on-1 session with me and Taylor. And we will all work together to co-design a magical tool just for you. We have over 50 years of combined magical experience in a whole range of different ways. So we would love to get together with someone and help them create their own magical tool. So we'll be offering a draw for a session with us. And also, if you share with us, we'll also invite you to our August Magical Experiments Alchemy Lab. So this is the call that we run for our paid subscribers, and it's really a really fun, it's a lab. We get together, we focus on one person at a time, and help support them with their magic as a community. And our August focus will be on magical tools. So we would love for all of you to get involved and to share with us. And if you have any questions about making magical tools, or what you might want. Thank you, Nima. Yes, we had our last and first lab last month, and it was such a joy. It was just the creativity that everyone brought to the table, and the magic that has come from it has been amazing. So
we're going to have our next lab next week, actually, a week from today.
We are.
Yeah, so the Alchemy Lab is basically a magical mastermind, and it is available for our paid subscribers. It's no cost to them. I mean, it's one of our ways of creating community and giving a chance for everyone to get some feedback, some ideas, to work on our magic together. Sometimes it's really helpful to have people to bounce ideas off of and to share our things with. So, that's one of the perks of being a paid subscriber to the Magical Experiments Substack, and it's also just a really fun way to connect.
Yeah. So if anybody has any questions, curiosities, things you want to start workshopping right now, we are here. Please feel free to write a message. And Taylor, what's your next magical tool going to be?
Well, I'm actually creating a painting tonight, later on, and I'm charging it with the moon becoming fuller and fuller. And it is really a painting that is going to be a tool for helping me to reach out and connect with anxious men. because I'm doing a lot of work in my men's coaching around helping men with anxiety transform their anxiety into action. So I am creating a painting for the purpose of helping to open up some pathways that way and connect more deeply with those men out there that need that and are called to work with it. And so yeah, that's my next magic tool. What about you, Sheena?
I am. Well, I'm working on a couple of different alchemy perfumes right now. Um, so that's exciting. Um, as far as a new tool, I am looking at. What am I looking at? I have so many ideas. It's like I have to choose my next one. The curse of being multi-passionate. I really actually want to do some updated work with mind palaces. I have been reading some Bruno's work, and kind of going back to one of the main sources, and I'm kind of sitting with how can we update it? How can we make it relevant for magic today? It'll probably be incorporating some pop culture magic and some somatic and body magic. So I don't know what it's going to look like, but that's my intention.
Well, that sounds intriguing, and I know I have my own ideas and thoughts on that, especially because I've done some experiments that way myself. So I know we'll come up with something interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits that we get is we get to work together, and that could be a lot of fun.
It is. And we love working together with the community as well. We have a really good crew.
There we do. So I'm curious if you have any final questions for me about magical tools before we wrap up, and if anybody here has any final questions around magical tools, because again, this is your magical tool does help to sometimes make the magician. I think that is a very potent observation, or it certainly helps to pave the way toward the magic.
I do have a question. Because we kind of started with body magic, I feel like we should end it, and I would love to hear about your magical process in and around your tattoos. Tattoos is magical process and tools.
Yeah, so I do have some tattoos for people who are curious, and oh, we actually got a question. We'll come back to that before we wrap up. So just so people know, if you drop questions below, we will answer them. I just want to make sure you know that. And so for me, I mean, my tattoos have always been something that's meaningful to me. They represent something. Maybe it's been a life transition or change. The first tattoo that I ever got, for example, was a phoenix. I had moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I wanted to mark the fact that I was making a major life change. I've been living on the East Coast for most of my life. And so going to the West Coast was a huge change at that point. I had never really been outside of the East Coast of the United States. So it was a really big, I mean, I traveled, but living somewhere else, no, that was different. So that was a really huge change. And so I wanted to mark it. This is my most recent tattoo right here, this water, and you can kind of see it. I don't really like the camera angle there. There we go. Yeah, you can kind of see it, and it's a what I got that for was I've been doing a lot of inner work around melting the ice of my heart, especially around my relationship with the feminine, and I wrapped up all that work by the end of December of this last year, and I decided to get that tattoo as a reminder to never let my heart ice up again. But it's also really just a reminder of being in touch with my feminine while also continuing to do the work that I do with the masculine. So, a lot of times what I find is like a tattoo represents a specific life event, but it also represents, a very specific current of energy in terms of how we work with and mediate that current of energy. On
So
my
how
fingers,
does
for example, I have um, the astrological symbols on here. And those are really for the planets, and I use that as a way to connect with the planets magically, and to channel that particular energy into my magical workings. What were you gonna ask?
I was just about to ask how you use your tattoos as tools, but you just answered, so that's perfect. Dogtua has a question. Are some materials better conductors of magic?
Okay, so you have that orgone pyramid. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Wilhelm Reich. He was basically the person who came up with the concept of orgone, but maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because it uses very specific materials, doesn't it?
It does, and um, it serves as a collection and a focusing device. And it's the idea that it is attracting and working with orgone, which is kind of a mystical ish substance, in inexhaustible energy source. And I did choose very specific, like I chose the copper because copper is a very good conductor. Um, it always comes back to, and of course, like crystals, anything with like a crystalline, like a quartz crystal, it creates little electrical impulses. Why, like your Timex or your quartz crystal watches work. So there are substances that create more energy. There are also substances that like block and shield energy. So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And also, the best materials that you have are the ones that you imbue with your intention. So
I'll answer that question too. I mean, for me, like I also think part of it is the creative, artistic medium that plays a role. So for me, my best tools really are, like I said, my paintbrush, my mat, the paintings that I create are really useful materials. The paints themselves, and just the work that I do around that. I also have like both dry and wet alchemical materials that I created for the sphere of art working, basically treating them a very specific way, and those are really potent. So working with, like, do some research. Part of that research is going to be based on like what makes sense for you, and part of it's also going to be like what is in your magical system, and some of it ultimately is going to be like, yeah, there's this particular wood or this particular substance might be a better material to use. Like I wouldn't, like if I was doing a working around like setting boundaries or stuff like that, I would use lead. Lead's a great metal for that. But I wouldn't use lead if I'm trying to attract like more wealth, because lead's going to actually stop that up. So I mean, pay attention to those correspondences and things like that. It looks like we got another question. Do you have observations from creating scrying mirrors? This is from Theo. Um, have you created scrying mirrors, Sheena?
I have in that I've used mediums like basins of water and things like that. I have polished stone. I think that there is an act in the creation of them as well. And the intention in the creation really can kind of flavor the experience that you have. I don't do it as much with scrying mirrors, but I absolutely do it in like my in spagyrics or in any herbal blends that I'm making, or any ritual perfumes, things like that. It's a lot of magic is, for me, like my process is very organic, and it is in finding and bringing together and creating the tools where most of my magic happens. Then the ritual is just kind of the release. But you probably have more experience with scrying mirrors than I do.
Yeah, I've worked with both black mirrors, obsidian mirrors, and I've worked with clear glass. I think what I would observe about it is like, there's that one type of mirror is not necessarily better than the other. I think sometimes people kind of get caught up in that, and it's like, well, what's the purpose of the mirror? To help you connect, to go somewhere. I've worked with clear mirrors before. In fact, I use a clear mirror a lot of times when I'm doing scrying with myself, looking deep into my eyes and connecting with the image of me and using that to do some like deep inner work or doing some self-love work, self-respect work. That can be a really powerful form of scrying right there and connecting with the me within. And then, like with like dark mirrors, I'll typically do a lot of work with spirits. And what I try to do with that is when I'm using the mirror and working with it, is I try to find the reflection of like the symbol in the mirror and use that as part of the scrying experience, because I think that can be really powerful. It's one of the reasons I like to use candles with the mirror, with like the darkened mirrors, because again, can create that optical effect that I was talking about earlier. I think again, one thing I would really suggest, really just with scrying in general, is explore how you can set up your natural environment around you for the purposes of leading to deeper scrying work. And talk about this in scrying the divine, the importance of working with the environment, because that can be a really useful way to go deep, create a deeper state of altered consciousness and awareness using like the natural light, and also setting the mirror up in such a way that you're using that natural environment to help enhance the overall experience. And that would be one of the observations that I would share with that.
You reminded me of one of my favorite experiences, one of my favorite magical experiences that I was absolutely not setting out to do magic, but it's kind of like an example of, when you're interested in sex. I made a lens for photography out of ice. So I put it into a mirror shaped mold. I froze it. I did a little bit of like melting with it, and it was just it was a photo project. But what I ended up doing was like taking this ice mirror out into nature, and I was photographing through it and exploring it that way. But most of the time, I found myself just connecting with everything through that lens and actually scrying through the ice mirror and interacting with the dandelion or the tree or the mountain, all of the nature underneath it. And it was a totally unique perspective. And it gave me such an appreciation. It opened up this like whole new world because it was frozen.
Well, perfect. Well, I just want to thank you for what's been a wonderful conversation. I love these conversations with you and love doing them live because we always get into some interesting explorations. And I want to thank everyone who showed up live. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate and love having you as part of our community and being able to connect with you. And we love the questions and comments that you share. Thank you so, so much.
And we hope that you will join us for the Making Your Own Magical Tools experiment. And we will have that information posted tomorrow when the post goes live. And yeah, we are here. We love talking about all forms of magic and magical tools. And if you have any questions, if anything comes up, please reach out. We love to keep these conversations going.
Yep, you can reach out to us in the chat, or you can direct message either one of us in Substack. Please feel free to reach out, and thank you so much for being here. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.